Shalom from Jerusalem. This is TV7's Israel at War update. And as we're set to liberate the latest developments, particularly vis-a-vis the Gaza Strip, the hostage deal, a discussion about Syria, the Islamic Republic of Iran, its nuclear aspirations, and more, it's always important to remember how this war began. 439 days ago, on October 7th of last year, the Islamist Hamas and its terror affiliates in the Gaza Strip have launched an onslaught on southern Israel, declaring war by perpetrating a massacre, murdering some 1,200 mostly civilians, wounding over 4,800 others, and kidnapping some 250 people, including elderly, men, women, children, and infants. 100 of them remain in Hamas captivity to date. And as mentioned earlier, there are ongoing discussions and circulating reports about an potentially imminent, if I may add, outline to be adopted between Israel and the Islamist Hamas through Egyptian, Qatari, and American mediation. And to deliberate that and try dissect it somewhat, let's now turn to central Israel, where we're joined by Brigadier General in Reserve, Dr. Amnon Sofrin, formerly the head of the intelligence division at Mossad, as well as a senior officer at the IDF Intelligence Directorate. It's great to see you, General. And I'd like to immediately ask you, are you able to give us some insight into the back-channel discussions with regards to the ongoing negotiations right now being pushed forth in Qatar to try and implement such a much hoped-for hostage release agreement?
I think that we can sum it up very briefly and say that there are still problems on the way. There are still disagreements regarding the main issue of when the war will end, and the second issue is when Israel forces will leave Gaza Strip. That's a demand of Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. And this is consistent, even though now Mohammed Sinwar is controlling the area, but nevertheless, he doesn't move from his late brother stand. That means that we should stop the war and we should get out of Gaza in the end of this process. And of course, it won't be all in one, but it will be in some phases. And we don't know how many people will be brought back. And I see that the people that are negotiating are expressing some optimism. They say that it can be achieved within 2 or 3 weeks. This agreement that in the end will be forced to fall to a ceasefire, meaning that we will stop fighting for a period of time. They will release some of the hostages. I don't think that it is agreed yet how many people will be released. And I believe that I understand that Israel says that they would also be willing to accept bodies of people that died or on October 7 or during being in captive in Gaza. So we have to wait and see, because we need patience, and this is an ongoing process that needs what we call still nerves of both sides.
Thank you, Dr. Sofrin. Of course, for the sake of the families of the hostages, we won't dive into the circulating reports about possible details of the impending outline. Of course, it wouldn't be fair to the families of the hostages if on the one day they hear that their loved ones may be released within certain circumstances. On the next day, they will find out that they are not. So just we want to remain sensitive to their heart. With the second point that I would like to actually raised to our next guest, Brigadier General in Reserve, Yaron Rosen, formerly the chief of the cyber staff at the IDF, as well as an Air Force commander and a fighter pilot. It's always a pleasure to see you, General. I'd like to ask you particularly on the ongoing military activities in the Gaza Strip. We hear that Division 98 is set to redivert its attention after concluding their operational activities in Lebanon to the Gaza Strip, expected to be deployed there in the next couple of weeks. And therefore, what are the current objectives? Is it merely to force more military pressure on Hamas and to ensure that it does not rebound into a terror cells throughout the Gaza Strip or something of sorts?
Yeah, I think from a bird's eye view, we have to focus on the long term now, even though there are very important near-term efforts that need to be really conducted, which is first of all, and before everything in Gaza, it's the hostages. But again, from a bird's eye view and a long-term view, Israel's military success is part of a strategic, a wider, much wider strategic, regional strategic pivot. And under this regional strategic pivot, when everyone is sort of reorganizing their alliances, their focus, who's looking where, Turkey coming into play with everything in Syria, Iran much weaker than what it was before with its proxies. I think that again, moving forward, we will need to stabilize Gaza. This includes the hostage deal on one hand and pushing out Hamas. So it needs to be done simultaneously in a way. In Lebanon, the whole stabilization and rebalancing of the internal power structure, like how do the politics in Lebanon look like in the next 6 months or so without Iran diminishing Iranian influence and establishing a new power structure there. Syria, the same, but with different players. So what we're seeing is all this going on a nation by nation sort of structure, but Israel with these small, very important strategic and nation by nation focuses that we need to be dealing with have to face eastward to Iran, because the main thing here is preparing for the next phase and basically focusing on the strategic stabilization on one hand and neutralizing, and that's the end game, the crown threat, which is Iran.
Indeed. Of course, Israel also needs to come up with what will happen once those objectives are met, and various geostrategic developments out of that it needs also to take into account, since, as we saw in Syria, the moment the vacuum emerges in a specific region because of a diminishing power of a regional power scale, of course, the consequences are always apparent. And if another regional power seizes the opportunity, as the Turks have done in Syria, it seems like a paradigm shift within the historic context of the reality in the Middle East may indeed occur. Now, let's turn elsewhere in Israel, where we're joined by Brigadier General in Reserve Relik Shafir, formerly an Israel Air Force commander, as well as a fighter pilot, among a long list of other senior positions. It's always a pleasure to see you, General. Israel is reinforcing its defenses along its demilitarized zone of the 1974 Armistice Line with Syria in order to ensure that in the event that this fluid situation that is currently presiding in Syria may not be successful. Many people don't realize this. It's not just there is one transition of power and everything is going to go perfectly. So Israel needs to take into account all those different threats. Of course, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu visited the Golan Heights yesterday and made a couple of remarks alluding to those positions, that Israel may stay there for a while until the situation in Damascus stabilizes. What does Israel need to look beyond the Syrian border to say, okay, now we are no longer concerned with whatever is on the other side of that border?
That'll probably never happen because Syria is maybe in a shock situation now, but it's not going to last forever. As Syria, without a very strong-handed leader, was always a pack of tribes that was banded together through the Sykes-Picot agreement in 1916. So there are different interests in the Syrian scene, such as what are the Turks going to do with the Kurds in the northeast? What are the Druze in the south? What are they going? How are they going to be treated? And the Alawites along the Syrian coast, who were in control for the last 50 years or so, how are they going to manage with the Sunnis in power at this time? And of course, Iran. Is Iran going to stand by and see its assets, both in Syria and Lebanon, diminish? Will they find a different way to send Hezbollah weapons, maybe through the sea? And what is Israel going to do about it? So there are many variants to this algorithm that may not be stable at any time soon or any time at all. And this is the reason that Israel took those stronghold points, both in the along the Golan border and in the Mount Hermon, which is actually overlooking the Damascus area in a much better way than the former Hermon stronghold that we've held since 1967. So are we going to be proactive in the sense that if, let's say, the Druze are being harassed, are we going to be active in if there is interaction between Jordan and Syria? And let me remind you that in 1970, the Israeli Air Force thwarted off the Syrian army from raiding into Lebanon at the time. Don't want to go into history too far back, but the destabilizing effects of the tribal character is probably here to stay. And so let's hope for the best and plan for the worst.
Well, if we're talking about history, of course, Hafez al-Assad was instructed as the commander of the Air Force back then to go and intervene on the PLO's behalf, the Palestinian Liberation Organization in Jordan at the time, fighting against the Hashemite monarchy, and he refused to do so because he feared the Israeli Air Force coming to overwhelm the Syrian Air Force. That was, of course, good for him, because if not, those 64 years of the Assad regime would not have existed. But nonetheless, his son fell apparently a lot farther from the tree than people expected. Now, when talking about the various compositions within Syria, Israel will stand by the Druze. It already made that public and made the overtures towards the other side to keep them at bay. They have taken that into their calculation. And don't forget the Christians within that very fluid situation, which are a persecuted minority. Just to give our viewers a little bit of insight, 2011, there were roughly 2.5 million Christians residing in Syria. 13 years later, we're only talking about less than 220,000. So this is a very significant reduction of Christians living in Syria under the Assad regime and the various terrorist organizations operating in that country, something that, of course, the West needs to take note of. But with that being said, General Sofrin, the fact that the Assad regime has fallen has placed the Iranian proxy Hezbollah in a very tough position. Is this something that Israel can capitalize on? And if so, why wait?
First of all, I think that Hezbollah is in the worst shape that it was ever, I think, since 1982, maybe, or 1983 when it was established. First of all, they don't have any route, on-ground route to deliver weapon systems coming out from Iran, like they used to do. They used to deliver it via Iraq, and then enter Syria, and from there to Lebanon. The second phase, or the second option, was by the air. cargo airplane that landed in Damascus and from there delivered to Lebanon. And now whenever some of these airplanes try to land in Syria or in Beirut, the IDF or the Israeli Air Force actually drove them away and didn't allow them to get down or to land. And therefore, we are in a situation that Hezbollah has only the weapon systems it possesses right now. He can't renew his arsenal. He can't get any more weapon systems, not advanced ones and not even old ones. That's first. Second, he is now under pressure because people from South Lebanon began to sue Hezbollah in what we call in courts in South Lebanon, claiming that Hezbollah applied weapon systems and explosives in their homes and dug underground tunnels beneath their homes without even part of them knowing that, and now they're complaining. And that means that they don't fear from Hezbollah anymore. And this is a great sign for Lebanon. Now, Naim Qassem gave a speech just yesterday or the day before, and he said that they are going to work together with the Lebanese government to establish new institutions of governance inside Lebanon, including the election of a new president. And I don't believe that he is going to insist on somebody like Nasrallah did before him and deny the ability to elect somebody with the be agreed on all sides. And this is a great opportunity for Lebanon. And Lebanon may, the Lebanese government and the Lebanese people may now apply more pressure on Hezbollah because Hezbollah is isolated. And we have to watch and see how things are developing inside Lebanon and to see if we have to interfere or not, because we don't have to interfere if things are going right on this direction, even though it will take more time.
Indeed. Well, we do need to take into account also a geostrategic fact where Hezbollah, under directives of Iran, has suppressed the people of Tripoli, which usually were under the influence of Turkey, among others, Saudi Arabia as well, but predominantly Turkey has been soaring up when we're talking about support in the northern part of Lebanon, and therefore we do see indications that Turkey is doubling down on its efforts to increase its influence there, and by doing so also applying additional pressure on the Iranian proxy in the south, which may bring again Turkey and Iran right now are at an all-time low when we're talking about relations. Well, maybe not at an all-time low, 15, 14, roughly 600 years almost ago, or a little bit more. There was a scenario in which Turkey, or the Ottomans back then, in order to conquer the Levant, went and defeated the Persians in order to make that happen. So this rivalry is an ongoing rivalry. But General Rosen, without going down that memory line of various historic events, what should Israel look towards Lebanon, on the one hand, at a time when Hezbollah still possesses roughly 20 to 30% of what used to be its very significant arsenal, which is still a significant amount of munitions. And in the event that Israel decides to take out, for instance, Iran's nuclear capabilities, what would be the consequences for Lebanon?
I think it is very clear that the military capacity that is left in Lebanon with Hezbollah is something that I'm not sure that Hezbollah will actually engage and use, because their calculus right now is how do they diplomatically, internally establish this new equilibrium to stay in some kind of have some kind of influence inside the Lebanese new government structure. And there will be a new government structure. So I think that it is time for Israel to, of course, continue work with its most important ally, which is the United States, to apply diplomatic power to sort of put the final nail in this campaign in Lebanon and to nail a deal, maybe with Lebanon before even Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has influence in Lebanon, and it may be leeway, sort of a way in for Saudi Arabia. Okay, they did it as well. They actually will be the ones brokering this in the background. And I think there is a tie here. We need to remember that Saudi Arabia was a moment ago sort of jumping between sides because it didn't see how exactly it will support Israel after it should go for a deal with Israel after October 7th. Oh, maybe Israel is not such a good idea to be an ally with, but now it is, but it needs a good reason because everything that's going on with the after effects of the war and how Gaza looks like and the rest of the region. So I think all nations now, all leaders now are open to new deals, and that's the reshaping of the region. That is transforming military victories into lasting political gains. Now, is it going to be easy? No. Is everything going to play to our side? I'm sure it's not. We also cannot, sort of be in this thought that we can reorganize the whole region. It is not something that works. We're not that strong. We need to take care of our interests. And hopefully, if we take care of Iran, just as we did with Hezbollah, things will shape in the way which is strategically good for Israel.
I think we're a lot stronger than what we give credit to ourselves for. Of course, it seems like the enemies of Israel are giving us plenty of service in heightening our own capabilities. So sometimes we should also listen to them about our own capabilities rather than figure out other context for that. But nevertheless, General Shafir, I'd like to ask you about the Iranian file since the IAEA is deliberating further the situation in the Islamic Republic when we're talking about the nuclear file. Grossi just earlier this week, while being in Italy, highlighted that the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action of 2015 is no longer valid for keeping check on Iran's nuclear program, since it is far beyond this level that was back then guaranteed at 3.75% enriched uranium. Now it's up and running with quantities that the IAEA Director General highlighted may bring Iran to become a nuclear state very soon. Will Israel stand idly by and allow that to happen, or will there be a deeper effort in collaboration with the United States, of course, to ensure that Iran will never attain nuclear weapon capabilities?
I think we should widen our scope when we speak about this, because this has to tie with the US and China understandings, and then the Ukraine war, which will probably come to an end, or will have to come to an end prior to the Iran case. This is the most pressing moment. I'm talking about Ukraine. So it's probably going to be part of a deal between the US, Russia, and Ukraine with China. These are the main focuses. And part of the deal could be pulling Iran in, because Iran, who are in a very dire strait financially and economically, still have the ability to sell oil to China, which is their main buyer. So if everything is in a pact, then Iran should make probably a deal on driving down their nuclear program in order for the United States to allow, I'm using this term, to allow through different types of leverages, to allow for a better financial offerings, i.e. selling to China and so on. So this is probably what's behind the Iranians trying to run up their program so they have a better hand or better cards to deal with following January 20th, rather than running for the bomb itself. Even if they do hasten their run, Israel has the ability on its own, maybe not to attack the main site, which the Israeli Air Force cannot really take off without the US B-1, B-2 capabilities, and for other reasons, but stop other parts of the Iranian nuclear program, testing program in Fortune and places like these. And we're not talking yet about the Harj Island as an example of an economic pressure, which will probably cause a cascading deterioration in the area. I'm not sure the Americans will approve of that. So there are many possibilities of dealing with Iran prior to the US getting in and using its B-1, B-2 bombers to actually stop the Iranian program.
2 points. The first one, a maximum pressure campaign is going to be implemented on day one. Number two, I suspect that President Trump will establish an ultimatum to the Iranians also within the first several days. And if the Iranians do not take it seriously and do not act accordingly, they will face the consequences thereof, of which neither they nor we can really predict what Trump has in his mind for that. But this is all the time that we have for today. I'd like to thank General Relik Shafir, General Yaron Rosen, and General Dr. Amnon Sofrin for all of your insights today, and I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next edition from here in Jerusalem, Shalom. For more of TV7's productions and editorials, we invite you to visit our website at www.tv7israelnews.com.
Jerusalem Studio, now available on Spotify.